You know what keeps most people awake at 3 in the morning? It's not the bills, though those are real. It's not the job, though that might be part of it. What really haunts us in those quiet hours is the gap between who we are and who we said we'd become, that space between the promise and the reality. That's where regret lives, and let me tell you, I know that address well because I lived there for years. I was 25 years old working as a stock clerk, and I was broke. Not just financially broke, though that was true enough. I was broke in my promises. Every new year, I'd make these grand declarations about who I was going to become. I'd tell myself, this is the year I get serious. This is the year I read those books. This is the year I start that business. This is the year I become the man I see in my mind when I close my eyes. And you know what happened? January would turn into February, February into March, and by April, I couldn't even remember what I'd promised myself. The dreams got quieter, the voice got smaller, and the person I said I'd be, he stayed right where I left him, in my imagination. Here's what nobody tells you about breaking promises to yourself. When you break a promise to someone else, there's accountability. They might get angry, disappointed, they might stop trusting you. There's a consequence that's visible, that you have to face. But when you break a promise to yourself, who's there to hold you accountable? Nobody. It's just you in that mirror, and most of us get pretty good at avoiding our own eyes. We get really skilled at making excuses that sound reasonable, at explaining away our lack of progress with circumstances and bad luck and timing that wasn't quite right. And the dangerous part? Those excuses work. They work so well that we believe them. But here's the truth that changed my life when I finally had the courage to face it. Every single day that you don't do what you said you'd do, every single day that you choose the easy path over the right path, every single day that you let distraction win over discipline, you're not just losing time, you're losing yourself. You're becoming someone you didn't intend to be. Because if you're not building the person you promised yourself you'd become, you're building someone else. Someone smaller, someone who's mastered the art of settling, someone who's an expert at almost. Let me tell you something about how this accumulation works, because it's not dramatic. Nobody wakes up one day and suddenly realizes they've wasted their entire life. It doesn't happen like that. It happens in increments so small you barely notice. It's the book you didn't read today, the workouts you skipped, the difficult conversation you avoided, the business idea you said you'd work on this weekend that's now been this weekend for 3 years. It's the phone call you should have made, the skill you should have learned, the person you should have become by now. Each one seems insignificant. Each one seems like it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. But they compound. You know what compounds means? It means they add up with interest. Every broken promise to yourself doesn't just stay at 0, it goes negative. Because while you're not moving forward, time is moving forward. While you're not growing, the gap between who you are and who you could be is growing. And here's the killer. Every day you betray yourself, it gets easier to do it again tomorrow. You're building a pattern. You're creating a character. You're becoming the kind of person who doesn't keep their word, even to themselves, especially to themselves. I remember sitting in my small apartment one evening, and I was watching television. I can't even remember what show it was. That's how important it was. But I remember this feeling washing over me, this awareness that came out of nowhere. I thought about all the hours I'd spent right there on that couch, all the evenings that had disappeared into that screen, all the things I'd said I was going to do when I had time, and here I was with time, and what was I doing with it? Nothing that mattered. Nothing that was building the life I said I wanted. Nothing that was creating the person I'd promised myself I'd be. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. I felt disgusted with myself. Now, that's not a comfortable feeling. Most people, when they feel that disgust, they push it away real quick. They change the channel, literally and figuratively. They find a distraction. They call a friend. They grab a beer. They do anything to not sit with that uncomfortable truth. But I sat with it that night. I let it sink in. And here's what I realized. That feeling wasn't my enemy. that disgust, that disappointment, that recognition of the gap between my promises and my reality, that was actually my friend. That was the truth trying to wake me up. That was life giving me one more chance to get serious. The thing about distractions is that we think they're just stealing our time. We think the problem is that we watch television for 3 hours instead of working on our goals. We think the problem is that we scroll through social media instead of reading that book. We think the problem is time management, but that's not the real problem. The real problem is that every hour you spend distracted is an hour you're not spending becoming. It's an hour you're giving away to someone else's priorities, someone else's agenda, someone else's content, while your own life, your own potential, your own promise sits there waiting for you to remember, waiting for you to care enough to do something about it. And here's what makes this so painful when you really face it. The person you promised yourself you'd be isn't some fantasy. It's not unrealistic. It's not asking too much. When you made that promise to yourself, you weren't being naive. You were being honest. You saw your potential. You felt what was possible. You knew somewhere deep inside what you were capable of becoming. That version of yourself wasn't a lie. But somewhere along the way, you started treating it like it was. You started acting like it was just a dream, just wishful thinking, just something nice to imagine, but not something to actually build. Let me tell you something that might be hard to hear, but that you need to understand. That person you promised yourself you'd be, they're not waiting for you in the future. They're not going to magically appear when the conditions are right, when you have more time, when you have more money, when things settle down. That person is being built or destroyed right now, in this moment, by the choices you're making today. Every decision you make is either construction or demolition. You're either building toward that promise or you're tearing it down. There's no neutral. There's no pause button. There's no waiting area where your potential sits frozen until you're ready to work on it. The person you become is simply the accumulation of the choices you make every single day. And if your daily choices don't reflect the promises you made to yourself, then your life won't reflect them either. It's that simple and it's that hard. You can't live one way and expect to become someone who lives another way. You can't spend your days on distractions and expect to become someone who's focused. You can't avoid hard work and expect to become someone who's accomplished something hard. You can't break your word to yourself repeatedly and expect to become someone who has integrity. The math doesn't work. But here's what I learned that night sitting on that couch. And here's what changed everything for me. Awareness alone doesn't change anything. Feeling bad about yourself doesn't change anything. Knowing you're not who you said you'd be doesn't change anything. What changes things is decision followed by action. What changes things is saying right now in this moment, I'm drawing a line. On this side of the line is who I was, with all my broken promises and wasted time and empty excuses. On this side of the line is who I'm becoming, starting now. Not tomorrow, not Monday, not when conditions are perfect, now. Because the truth is, the gap between who you are and who you promised yourself you'd be can start closing today. Not completely, not all at once, but it can start. And starting is the difference between dreamers and achievers, between people who wish and people who become, between living with regret and living with self-respect. So the question isn't whether you've broken promises to yourself in the past. Most of us have. The question is what you're going to do about it today. You know what I've learned after all these years of watching people succeed and fail? There's a fundamental difference between people who are interested in success and people who are committed to it. And that difference explains everything. It explains why some people with average talent go farther than people with extraordinary gifts. It explains why some people transform their lives while others stay stuck year after year. It explains why some people keep their promises to themselves while others keep breaking them. The difference is what I call locking in. Let me tell you about two men I knew when I was getting started in business. Both of them came to the same seminar I attended. Both of them heard the same ideas. Both of them got excited about changing their lives. Both of them said, "This is it. This is what I've been looking for." After the seminar ended, I watched what happened to both of them over the next 5 years, and it taught me more about success than any book I ever read. The first man, let's call him John, he was interested. He bought the books. He attended a few more seminars. He'd work on his goals when he felt inspired. He'd get up early for a week or two when motivation was high. He'd start eating better till the weekend came around. He'd work on his business plan till something came up. And things were always coming up. A friend needed help. The family had an event. There was a good game on television. He was tired from work. The weather was bad. His wife wasn't supportive. The economy wasn't right. The timing wasn't perfect. John had an excuse for everything. And you know what? Every single excuse was valid. They were all true. But they were also irrelevant. The second man, I'll call him Bill, he was committed. When he left that seminar, something in him changed at a level that didn't change back. He took those same ideas, those same principles, and he locked in. What does that mean? It means he decided that nothing was going to stop him. Not inconvenience, not discomfort, not other people's opinions, not setbacks, not his own feelings. He was going to do what needed to be done, whether he felt like it or not, whether it was convenient or not, whether people understood or not. He made a decision, and that decision removed all other options from the table. Bill got up at 5 in the morning every single day, even when he was tired, especially when he was tired. He read for an hour before work. He listened to educational material during his commute. He worked on his business after his job ended. He did this when he was motivated and when he wasn't. He did this when people supported him and when they thought he was crazy. He did this when he saw results and when he couldn't see any progress at all. He did it because he said he would do it, and that was enough reason. That's commitment. That's locking in. 5 years later, John was still interested. He was still talking about what he was going to do someday. He was still waiting for the right time, the right opportunity, the right feeling. He was still at the same job, making the same money, living the same life, having the same conversations. Nothing had changed except he was 5 years older, and his dreams were 5 years more faded. Bill had completely transformed his life. New business, new income, new circle of friends, new level of confidence, new person. And here's what people didn't understand. They'd look at Bill and say he was lucky, he was talented, he had advantages. None of that was true. What Bill had was commitment. What Bill did was lock in. Let me tell you what locking in really means, because I think people misunderstand it. It doesn't mean you're perfect. It doesn't mean you never have a bad day or make a mistake. It doesn't mean you're some kind of machine without feelings or struggles. Locking in means you've removed negotiation from the equation. You've stopped having daily conversations with yourself about whether you're going to do what you said you'd do. You've stopped making decisions based on how you feel in the moment. You've created a commitment that's deeper than your mood, stronger than your excuses, and more powerful than your circumstances. Most people negotiate with themselves every single day. The alarm goes off. Should I get up or hit snooze? Time to exercise. Should I work out or skip it today? Time to work on the business. Should I do this or watch something instead? Time to eat healthy. Should I stick to the plan or have this instead? They're making hundreds of micro decisions every day, and every decision is up for debate. That's exhausting. That's why willpower runs out. That's why people give up. They're fighting themselves constantly, and eventually they lose. When you lock in, you stop negotiating. You've already decided. The alarm goes off, you get up. That's it. No conversation, no debate, no analysis of how tired you are. Time to exercise, you exercise. Time to work, you work. Time to read, you read. You've removed the decision from the moment and made it in advance with a clear mind and a strong commitment. That's the power of locking in. You're not using willpower to fight yourself every day. You're using commitment to remove the fight entirely. Now, here's something most people don't want to hear but need to understand. Locking in requires you to disappoint some people. It requires you to say no to invitations. It requires you to miss some parties, some gatherings, some events that everyone else is attending. It requires you to let some relationships fade because they're not taking you where you need to go. It requires you to stand alone sometimes while people question your choices, criticize your dedication, and call you obsessed. And you know what? They're right. You are obsessed. You're obsessed with keeping your promise to yourself. You're obsessed with becoming who you said you'd be. You're obsessed with not wasting the one life you've been given. Your life's direction isn't determined by what you say yes to. It's determined by what you say no to. Everyone says yes to their dreams. Everyone says yes to success. Everyone says yes to becoming better. But who? Who says no to the distractions? Who says no to the time wasters? Who says no to the relationships that drain them? Who says no to the comfort that keeps them small? Who says no to the good so they can say yes to the great? That's the real question. That's where commitment shows itself. That's where you separate the interested from the committed. I had to say no to a lot of things when I decided to lock in. I said no to television most nights. I said no to sleeping late on weekends. I said no to friends who wanted to waste time complaining instead of improving. I said no to food that made me feel sluggish. I said no to activities that were fun but didn't move me forward. I said no to my own excuses, my own resistance, my own voice that said, just this once won't matter. And you know what happened? Every time I said no to something that didn't serve my commitment, I was saying yes to the person I promised myself I'd become. Every no was actually a yes in disguise. Here's what you need to understand about commitment. It's not a one-time decision. You don't commit once and then you're done. Commitment is a daily renewal. Every morning you wake up and you commit again. Every moment you face a choice, you commit again. Every time you feel like quitting, you commit again. Commitment isn't a feeling that sweeps over you and carries you to success. Commitment is a decision you make over and over and over again, especially when you don't feel like it, especially when it's hard, especially when nobody's watching. That's when commitment matters most. People think discipline is restriction. They think locking in means giving up freedom. They've got it backwards. Discipline is freedom. When you're committed, when you're locked in, you're free from the chaos of constant decision-making. You're free from the guilt of broken promises. You're free from the regret of wasted time. You're free from the anxiety of wondering if you'll ever become who you want to be. You're free because you know exactly who you are. You're the kind of person who does what they say they'll do. You're the kind of person who keeps their word to themselves. You're the kind of person who's building something real. The uncommitted person thinks they're free because they can do whatever they want whenever they want, but they're not free. They're slaves to their impulses, their moods, their circumstances, their excuses. They're trapped in a life they didn't design, becoming a person they didn't choose, living out a story they're not proud of. That's not freedom. That's prison with better furniture. Real freedom comes from commitment. Real freedom comes from locking in. Real freedom comes from knowing that you're in control of your own becoming, that you're keeping your promises, that you're building the life and the person you said you would build. So here's what I want you to understand. If you want different results, you don't need more information. You probably already know what to do. You don't need more motivation. Motivation comes and goes like the weather. What you need is to move from interest to commitment. You need to lock in. You need to stop negotiating with yourself and start honoring yourself. You need to make a decision that removes all other options. You need to become the kind of person who does what they say they'll do, not because it's easy or convenient or comfortable, but because they said they'd do it. And that needs to be reason enough. Let me tell you something about the times we're living in. We're in a war, and most people don't even know they're fighting it. It's a war for your attention, for your focus, for your mind. And if you're not winning this war, you're losing the most valuable thing you have. Not your time, though time matters. Not your money, though money helps. Your attention, your ability to focus on what matters. Your capacity to stay locked in on building the person you promised yourself you'd be. That's what's under attack every single moment of every single day. I grew up in a different era. When I was young, if you wanted distraction, you had to go find it. You had to leave your house. You had to turn on one of 3 television channels. You had to pick up a newspaper. But now distraction finds you. It's in your pocket. It's on your wrist. It's in every room of your house. It buzzes, it beeps, it notifies, it updates, it demands your attention 1,000 times a day. And here's what most people don't realize. Every time you give your attention to something that doesn't matter, you're taking it away from something that does. Every time you check that phone, scroll that feed, watch that video, you're making a choice. You're choosing distraction over development. You're choosing entertainment over education. You're choosing easy over meaningful. I remember when I started getting serious about my life, one of the first things I did was take inventory of where my time was going. I wrote down everything I did for a week. Everything. How long I spent at work, how long I spent reading, how long I spent watching television, how long I spent in meaningless conversations. And when I looked at that paper, I was shocked. I'd wasted more than 30 hours that week on things that didn't move my life forward 1 inch. 30 hours. That's almost a full work week that I threw away on nothing. And I'd been doing that every week for years. No wonder I wasn't where I wanted to be. I was spending my life on things that didn't matter. So I made a decision. I was going to guard my time like it was money. Actually, better than money, because you can always make more money. You can't make more time. Every hour that passes is gone forever. You don't get it back. You don't get a refund. You don't get a second chance at today. So I started treating my attention like the treasure it is. I stopped giving it away to anyone and anything that asked for it. I became selective. I became protective. I became ruthless about what got access to my mind. Here's what I learned about distractions. There are 2 kinds, the obvious ones and the disguised ones. The obvious ones are easy to spot. Television, gossip, scrolling through social media for hours, lying in bed when you should be up, hanging around people who pull you down. Those are obvious time wasters, and most people know they should avoid them. They just don't have the discipline to do it. But the disguised distractions, those are dangerous because they feel productive. They feel like work. They feel important. Checking email for the 20th time today, that feels like work. But is it really? Or are you just avoiding the hard task that actually matters? Organizing your desk again. That feels productive, but does it move you forward? Or are you just procrastinating, going to another meeting? That feels important, but is it? Or are you just filling time with activity that looks like progress but leads nowhere? The disguised. Distractions are the ones that keep people busy but not productive, active but not effective, moving but not progressing. And here's something I had to face about myself, and maybe you need to face it too. Sometimes we use distraction as medication. We're not just wasting time, we're avoiding something. We're avoiding the hard work of becoming. We're avoiding the discomfort of growth. We're avoiding the fear that comes with taking real risks. We're avoiding the possibility of failure, so we stay busy with things that don't matter because at least those things are safe. At least we can't fail at scrolling. At least we can't get rejected by our television. At least we can't be disappointed by doing nothing. But here's what that avoidance costs you. Every day you medicate yourself with distraction is another day you don't become who you promised yourself you'd be. Every day you avoid the hard work is another day the gap gets wider between who you are and who you could be. Every day you choose comfort over growth is another day you betray yourself. And those days add up to weeks, then months, then years, then a lifetime. And one day you wake up and you're 65 years old and you realize you spent your entire life avoiding the very thing you were supposed to become. So what do you do about it? You create an environment that makes focus easier than distraction. You don't rely on willpower alone because willpower runs out. You make structural changes. You remove temptation instead of trying to resist it every single day. You put your phone in another room when you're working. You cancel the subscriptions that waste your time. You stop following people who don't add value to your life. You tell your friends you're not available during certain hours. You protect your morning like it's sacred because it is. You build walls around your focus time so that nothing gets in unless it's absolutely essential. And you learn the difference between rest and distraction. Rest restores you. You read something valuable. You take a walk. You have a meaningful conversation. You sleep. You exercise. These things fill you back up. They give you energy. They prepare you for more focused work. Distraction depletes you. You scroll mindlessly. You watch content that doesn't matter. You engage in activities that leave you feeling empty. These things drain you. They leave you tired but not rested, busy but not productive, entertained but not fulfilled. Here's the truth. You can't build anything significant with a distracted mind. You can't create. You can't learn deeply. You can't solve complex problems. You can't become exceptional. You can't keep your promises to yourself. All of that requires sustained attention, deep focus, and the ability to stay locked in when everything around you is trying to pull you away. And in a world that's designed to distract you, that ability to focus is becoming the rarest and most valuable skill you can develop. So the question is, are you willing to fight for your attention? Are you willing to protect your focus like your life depends on it? Because it does. Your life, your dreams, your potential, the person you promised yourself you'd be, all of it depends on whether you can win this war against distraction. All of it depends on what you do daily, what you give your attention to daily, what you build daily. And that's what we need to talk about next. You don't build a life in one dramatic moment. You don't become exceptional in a single decision. You don't transform yourself with one heroic effort. You build it day by day, hour by hour, choice by choice, in moments so small they seem insignificant. But let me tell you something I've learned after all these years. Success is nothing more than a few simple disciplines practiced every single day. And failure is nothing more than a few errors in judgment repeated every single day. That's it. That's the whole game. When I finally turned my life around, people wanted to know what big thing I did. What was the secret? What was the breakthrough moment? And I had to tell them the truth. There was no big thing. There were 1,000 small things. I got up when the alarm went off instead of hitting snooze. I read 10 pages instead of watching television. I had a healthy breakfast instead of skipping it. I made that phone call instead of putting it off. I worked on my goals for an hour instead of making excuses. None of these things were dramatic. None of them were impressive. But I did them every single day, and over time, those small disciplines compounded into a completely different life. Here's what most people don't understand about becoming. You're either building or you're eroding. There's no standing still. There's no maintenance mode. Every single day, with every choice you make, you're moving in one direction or the other. You're becoming more or you're becoming less. You're getting stronger or you're getting weaker. You're moving toward the person you promised yourself you'd be, or you're moving away from that person. And the scary part? Most of the movement happens so slowly you don't notice it until years have passed. That's why you need to evaluate yourself honestly at the end of each day. Not to punish yourself, not to feel guilty, but to learn, to adjust, to ask yourself, did I keep my word to myself today? Did I do what I said I'd do? Did I move forward or did I stand still? And if you didn't, that's okay. You don't carry that failure into tomorrow. You learn from it and you begin again. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be consistent. You don't need to win every day. You just need to win more days than you lose. Here's what I want you to understand. The person you promised yourself you'd be is built in these quiet moments when nobody's watching, when you choose discipline over comfort, when you do the work even though you don't feel like it, when you keep going even though nobody would know if you quit. Those are the moments that matter. Those are the moments that build character. Those are the moments that separate who you are from who you're becoming. So start today. right now, this moment. Make one decision that honors the promise you made to yourself. Just one. Not 10. Not a complete life overhaul. One simple decision. Get up. Open that book. Make that call. Take that walk. Write that page. Do that workout. One decision. And then tomorrow, do it again. And the day after that, do it again. And watch what happens when you start keeping small promises to yourself. Watch how it builds. Watch how you change. Watch how you become. Because at the end of your life, the only thing that will matter is whether you became the person you promised yourself you'd be. Not what other people thought. Not what you accomplished in other people's eyes, but whether you kept your word to yourself, whether you lived with integrity, whether you built something real. That's the measure of a life well lived. That's the definition of success. And that life, that person, that success, it starts today.